time anymore. But I am really happy to have here as our guest Julia Mussakovska from Ukraine. We met with Julia in 2023, I think it was, in Exeter. My younger kid was very small then, so I could only spend a few days away. It was my first working meeting over so many years. And so I missed Julia's performance in Exeter, so her being there is like small part also related to a very egoistic wish to listen to her performance, and I'm really happy she agreed to come to talk to Prima Vista this year. And today Julia will be in conversation and with her Estonian translator Anna Verschik, who also won we have a poetry translation prize called August Translation Prize. So Anna won the translation prize for translating a poem by Julia. So they will have the conversation in English. The reading will be in Ukrainian and Estonian, and the English translations will be projected on the wall. So I wish you a nice evening.
Aitäh, thank you, дякую. So I'm very glad to be here with Julia as her translator. And so we will start, if you don't mind, we will start with a conversation and then we'll start reading. So, and we'll see how much of this conversation plan we'll manage. Yeah, it depends, of course. So, when did you start writing poetry, and was there any event or any impulse for you to start writing poetry? Can you describe it, please?
Thank you, Anna. Before I answer, I'd like to say hello to everyone. It's nice to see a packed room here. It's actually my second time in Estonia in my life, and also this year. And there is going to be a third visit in autumn, so Estonia is probably my destination of the year. And it's a pleasure to be here in your company and with my translator. Yeah, it's a very peculiar question. How do you happen to become a poet? Can one really become a poet? And I don't remember a particular event that triggered my poetic writing. I think it was mostly the outcome of my personality and the environment. Isn't one, in part, a product of one's environment? Anyway. So I was growing in a home full of books and music, and my mother was and still is a music teacher of accordion. And my father, although he wasn't able to finish his university degree because of the Soviet repressions, has collected a wide library of books, actually in different languages, and starting from novels by Dumas and Feuchtwanger and George Sand and whatnot, Dreiser. Detective stories of Bohumil Rainov were very popular as well. To poetry and to poets like Shevchenko and Franco and Shakespeare, and also the very loved poets of the Beat generation. So he also had a wide collection of music records, and if any of you remember those reel tapes that we used to play, or our parents used to play, in variety from classics to folk and jazz, and a lot of what we now call classic rock music, like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, of course the Beatles, the Doors, but you know the list is much longer. I can go on and on. And my father also sang a lot to me, and played records at home, and my mother, of course, played her accordion. So there was a lot of music in my environment, and actually my interest in poetry stemmed from the song lyrics. So I was listening to all these songs and I was wondering if I could probably compose something like that. And well, that was the environment. And then, of course, I raided local libraries a lot after I finished the one in our home. So also, personality-wise, as a child, I was deemed too sensitive, and that was not a compliment at that time. So I could spot things that people didn't notice and didn't pay attention to. And I started reading quite early, and the first thing that really fascinated me were fairy tales and mythology, legends and myths, especially of those of ancient Greek myths and ancient Egypt, and fairy tales actually of all possible nations that I could ever find. And that is very present in my poetry still, the motifs from fairy tales and mythology. And all of this proved instrumental in me starting to write something, scribble, I would say. So I started composing poems very early. I don't remember the very first one, but one memory is very vivid, and my family always recalls that time when I was at school, and I was very sick and was staying with my grandmother, and I was coughing so much at night I couldn't sleep, and I was actually composing a fairy tale, a rhymed fairy tale, and it was about a fox and a bear, you know, a very unconventional couple. And my grandmother was staying with me, and she was writing this text down in this big green notebook. So that's basically how it started.
So from prose, from fairy tales to poetry. Oh, it was rhymed, you mentioned, yeah?
Yes, it was rhymed.
So you just improvised.
I will not quote it.
No. We're not asking to, you to read it, but it was improvisation and all in verses.
Yes, and I was actually composing it in my head, not on paper. And that's why all poetry is always connected in a way with music, with the rhythm. When I'm writing it, I hear it in my head first, and I think it is rhythm that is born in the first place.
Yeah, I understand. So there's a connection with music and rhythm and poetry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the next question is, maybe it's not terribly original, because I understand that Ukrainian poets are nowadays they are asked this kind of questions. So the Russia's full-scale invasion against Ukraine gave a tremendous impulse to Ukrainian poetry. So suddenly we see Ukrainian poetry everywhere. But did it change your style, your poetics, or no? Because it's a personal question. There are different poets and different answers to this question.
Yes, actually, I must say that I've experienced two major shifts in my writing when it comes to the circumstances of Russia's war. And the first shift happened back in 2014, and that's actually when the Russian aggression started. So it was also the time of the Revolution of Dignity, which is a very important historical event, and for many of us it was a point of no return. We have decided that freedom is actually the most important thing, and it's worth fighting for. And there were people who gave their lives for that, and are still doing that within the war. So at that time it was a shift in theme. So let's say the war became either the subject of the poem or the backdrop against which the poem was happening. So even though the war has not touched me personally, I was born and I still live in Western Ukraine, in Lviv, a beautiful UNESCO City of Literature. And I was far from where the events of the war starting in 2014 were happening. But I could feel the presence of the war, that it was taking more and more of the mental and physical space. And it affected me deeply. And at that time, in 2014, I wrote poems like Emergency Bag, and the other one, for example, Men Carry War Inside Them. And actually, these poems were perceived in 2022 as the newly written texts. People had difficulty believing that these were old poems of mine. So my writing style didn't change immediately in 2014, but I moved away from the topics that were very natural to my poetry. My key themes that I was working with and that actually triggered my interest in writing, like the complexity of human relations, of human nature, romantic love, or fascination with nature, feminist topics like the societal struggles of women, motherhood. So even though I was not impacted directly by the war, I felt this imminent danger, and I mean many of us did. You could actually notice that in the Ukrainian poetry of that time, whatever you can find in translations, there were many authors speaking about the war either happening or coming. So in my collection of 2021, The God of Freedom, that is now available in English, there are still many poems that people think have appeared after 2022. And I think there were even book critics who have not noticed the afterword or the acknowledgement in the book saying, this is a book written before the full-scale invasion began, and it was translated during the first year of Russia's big war against Ukraine. So the change in the language. Well, it is quite hard to describe how it happened, because even if you were thinking about this threat of war coming, even if you were rationally making conclusions that Russia's aggression will expand on the full scale, even if you had your emergency bag packed and standing by the door, you still cannot be prepared to, like, the sound of the air raid alerts, the messages on your phone from your friends saying our cities are being bombed right now. Well, you're just, at that moment, you lose your language. Your language leaves you. So the words just fell apart, the language fell apart, and there was a necessity to focus on the most important things, on survival, what we were trying to get used to this abnormal new reality. But then, you know, as a poet and as a human, you have a responsibility to speak up. And at some point we understood that the survival also depends on our words and on our texts. And it was quite painful to pick up that language again. And so it was like learning to speak all over again, forming words, forming sentences, and trying to make all of this make sense in a poetic form. So, and then I thought, you know, speaking about war crimes, about the senseless destruction and murders and rapes and lootings, it does require a different language than speaking about romantic love or, you know, an idyllic weekend with your family, watching beautiful nature. So one probably needs a different kind of language, but I did not change my my style deliberately. It just happened intuitively. I had to learn to speak of these outrageous things about the atrocities, and I had to move away from this multi-layered structure of poetry that I really love. I love that poetry is a riddle you have to solve, that there are multiple layers. There's something on the surface, but if you dig a little deeper, there are deeper layers. And if you're trying to get your message across in times of war, if you're trying to bear witness and your main aim is to tell the truth, you cannot bury it too deep. You have to be quite straightforward. So that's how this new poetry language came about. The first poems I wrote, I really didn't think they were poems at all. I had this special term for them. I call them unpoems. You know, like in Margaret Atwood's novel, the Unwomen. So these were some kind of very strange creations. I remember once I just wrote the last line and I realized it is a poem. And it is shocking, and it comes also as a result of quite painful process when you're trying to speak about the horrible things happening to you right now, writing about trauma from within the trauma. So actually this book, this is my most recently published poetry collection, Stones and Nails. It is a great example of how, or the demonstration, how this change, this shift in language happened. It's divided into two sections, and the first section is written before 2022. And the second is a longer one, is written after the full-scale invasion began. So if you compare these poems, you can see that, especially the rhyme and musicality that was also very natural to my style. I kind of stepped away from it, and the poetic line is now broken, and there is still some kind of breathing in that poem, in those poems written after 22, but they're written in a completely different kind of language. And another thing is, I have not been writing a lot after 2022 because how would you write about the death of your friend or the children who are being raped, or the air drone that is hitting your home? It is still very painful, and that's why the collection is called Stones and Nails, because speaking about the war that has come to your home is like speaking with a mouth full of stones and nails. And that is the central poem of the book that Anna has translated and was awarded the prize.
We will read it eventually, I hope, yeah, in both languages.
Yeah.
Well, you were talking about before the full-scale invasion and after, but well, quite a long time has passed, more than 4 years. And for example, when I read Ukrainian poetry written, well, just after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, so 2022, maybe the beginning of 2023, and I read what has been written now, I feel some difference. So it's not only about, I'm not talking only about your poems, but in general. And it's quite difficult for me to formulate this difference, yet you feel it. What do you think about it? Am I right or not?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been over 4 years since the big war started, and it has affected nearly everyone in Ukraine right now. And I remember back in 2022, in the spring of 2022, we were talking about it today. How was it a very, very special spring after the last days of the February, of this horrible February. How we actually wrote quite a lot of poems during that spring. And we were trying to put in words the unimaginable things that were happening in Ukraine because of Russia's aggression. And we also used this act of expression to fuel our unity, because within a poem that speaks of a collective experience, people come together and people feel stronger. People are sharing this, and they're standing as one. So it was not only for us as poets to be able to breathe, because when you have this pain inside, you have to let it out. And what, if not a poem for a poet, can help? It was also for the readers. People were very eager to read new poetry. Also, our colleagues worldwide, the translators, were looking for Ukrainian wartime poetry. And that's how many of my poems were translated into different languages, although even those poems that were written before, just because the theme of war was key in my writing for quite a long time. So I could see myself and my colleagues responding to every significant event happening in poetry, and it could happen on the same day. And you can find this writing on social media on the evening or during the night of the day when some event has happened, and that was usually a terrible event. So when we come to Stones and Nails, there are poems dedicated to the memory of my friends and colleagues, among them writers Victoria Melina, Maxim Krevtsov, and Alexander Osadko, who is a husband of my close friend and writer, Hanna Osadko. And then, as of now, my other friend, writer Svetlana Povalyeva, has lost both of her sons who were killed on the battlefield. And just recently, several months ago, another friend and colleague, talented writer and photographer from Ternopil, Yurko Kostishin, was killed. And he didn't get to hold his book in his hands, his very long-awaited, beautiful book of both the text and the photography. So we are losing our friends and loved ones, and we don't really get to process these losses. We don't really have time to grieve, and we also do not allow ourselves to relax, because we have to be focused on our survival, in each of us in a different way. So this is a huge pressure to be forced to respond to every tragedy, every repeated tragedy, because the Russians are doing the same thing all over again. They're targeting civilians, they're bombing residential buildings, universities, museums. They have created an ecocide in the Kherson region by blowing up the Kakhovka dam. And a writer, a poet, feels this pressure to find new way each time to describe these horrible things. And look at our language. Our language was just broken, and we tried to put it back together. It's like an arm that was never properly healed, and you have to lift heavy weights with it. So I guess this is how we exhausted our language. And in the beginning, I think we had this illusion: if we scream loud enough, the international community will come to our rescue. Such a naivety. I look back at those thoughts right now, and I think we have really. Of course, we are exhausted, but we need to continue to do what we are doing. So I think we have accepted that we need to switch to this power-saving mode, that we need to save our voice, save our breath, save our words. Of course, poetry is still being written. I have written quite a little after this book, because yeah, you're sort of going numb, and the expectations of I can use this word, entertaining the audiences, because this kind of gore poetry is also a type of entertainment. And I mean, Susan Sontag writes about it regarding the pain of others. People feel shock and shame at watching the sufferings closely, but they're also very much drawn to it. They like it in some way. They need to have more details, and they need to learn something new each time. You have to surprise them. But I mean, how can we surprise them if Russia is continuing the same war crimes all over again?
Well, what you mentioned, that, well, you were naive, you were expecting, the international community seeing all this and, rushing to help. Well, I think that I mean, the peoples of the Baltic countries, we are not surprised that, well, it didn't happen, or it happened on a much smaller scale than you would expect. We have this historical memory. Just a side remark. There was an Estonian exiled writer, Vale Vuibopu, who wrote a novel with the title Keegi ei kuule meid, nobody hears us. And this is what, you are shouting, you are drawing attention to things, and so people hear and they don't hear. So this is, I quite understand. I'm not surprised, by the way, unfortunately.
I think we wanted to believe it, that somehow our rational side told us that's not going to happen. We have this cruel joke about NATO in Ukraine. What happens if Russia attacks a NATO country? Well, that country will be excluded from NATO. So yeah, we have to survive somehow with this dark humor. And also, I think that another thing about poetry, we now want to speak for each other more than we want to speak out externally. And we're just, our voice is not that loud. We don't want to overexhaust the voices. And there was just recently a new poem by Ostap Slovensky, another Ukrainian poet, that is called Whispers. So that's how you speak when you're in this energy-saving mode.
Yeah, well, just another political joke. Well, I think it was in 2023, I thought, and maybe many people thought in the same way, that it will not be, that Ukraine will not join NATO, but NATO will join Ukraine. Because, yeah, well, we see that Ukraine
That's
is...
an optimistic joke.
Well, yeah, but still. There are some signs of it. So I just wanted, maybe we don't have much time, we want to read more. So I will just ask you about social media, you mentioned it. So this is how, for example, how I came across many wonderful Ukrainian poets and well, you know how Facebook functions, so you see something your friend shares and then you go further and you explore. Or, well, and there are scholarly articles written about translations of Ukrainian poetry and the impact of Facebook and maybe some other platforms. So how do you feel about this? Do you think that social media somehow affects, well, the visibility, of course, so how much people learn your poetry, about your poetry? What do you think?
Well, it certainly does help, although I'm not a huge fan of social media. I just feel obliged that I need to cater to my audience and post updates once in a while. Well, we have this thing with Facebook. Facebook, although it's now considered social media for senior people, it's still very big in Ukraine. It is an extremely strange phenomenon. Maybe it began with its role during the Maidan revolution, when it all started with a person posting a message on Facebook, "Let's meet on Maidan." So this is a social media for longer text. That's where people would post their reflections, and that's where they would come to discuss things, to argue with each other, you know, sometimes to insult each other.
You wouldn't post it on Threads or what is there now, like short format, you know.
Yeah.
The number of signs is limited.
Restricted, yes.
Restricted,
but not,
yes.
not with Facebook. You can post your novels there if you want. So that's where people would go to find their audience. And I think it was natural for us. It has been for a while to post our, even the newly written poems on Facebook. Because there is no restrictions for Ukrainian magazines or journals or anthologies that concerns posting on social media. Because I know, for example, the American magazines would not allow you to do that. So you cannot read new poems by your favorite poet on social media. You have to wait for that magazine and so on. But it really makes things easier for us. I mean, if you want to get your message across, you can do it immediately. And there were texts that were going viral and so on. I mean, one of my poems gained its audience through YouTube, but not with me reading it, but with Timothy Snyder reading his translation of it.
Oh, yes, I know, I happen to know this. So Timothy Snyder in 2022, he gave a wonderful crash course in Ukrainian history. So it was serious enough, but it was designed for people who know nothing about Ukraine. And so there, I followed that course, so there he read it. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it was very popular in Ukraine at that time. It was a part of this course on Ukraine. It was also a surprise to me. I didn't know about it until I get to see this lecture. But still, I think people are used to both posting and reading new poetry on Facebook. I think we're going into Instagram as well, but not that much. I think Facebook still is #1. I don't know, there's no explanation, but that's actually where many translators are looking for Ukrainian poetry, and that's, I mean, through Facebook and Messenger, many of my translators have approached me. I mean, I answer messages sometimes on social media, and people are just, strangers are approaching with a request to translate the poetry or publish it somewhere. And I think it was a huge boom in the spring of 2022 with the Ukrainian poetry being translated to very unexpected languages, like you would wake up and find your poems translated to Vietnamese. And I mean, I feel much gratitude about this. I'm very thankful to all the translators who have used their time and resource to do that, to show their support for Ukraine, because we really need it. Because in terms of translations, Ukrainian literature is almost invisible, or has been until 2022. Now the situation is improving thanks to these courageous people, our translators.
Oh, thank you. So one question I have to, well, although not much time is left for reading, but I have to ask you, well, this war, of course, it's not about territory, it's not even about democracy versus dictatorship, it's a war for identity. Mm-hmm. So this is very important. So is there Ukrainian language, is there Ukrainian identity or not? So this is the central question of this war. And we know that, well, what happened during the Soviet era, many Ukrainians started speaking Russian. They shifted to Russian for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. And now what we see, it is, well, I'm a linguist, so I'm sorry I'm using this scholarly term. It's called reversing language shift. So people are going back to Ukrainian, and not just ordinary people, but poets and writers. And it's not a plaything, you know, it's very serious. You know, you have to rewire all your writing system and so on. So how do you feel about that? I know that you've been writing in Ukrainian all the time, but something is happening in Ukrainian poetry in this sense right now. So can you please comment?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that finally Russian is being recognized as the language of imperialism of colonial oppression, of colonial violence, and it is being pushed to the margins, just where Ukrainian has been for such a long time. And also during the years of Ukraine's own independence. So it's this is how the language gets scarred, or how the language gets tainted. Of course, it's not the fault of the language, but the actions that are being done with it. So I don't know if any of you remember the messages that were found written after the liberation of Kiev region. Messages written by Russian soldiers. One, maybe the most famous one, is "Who allowed you to live so well?" Or "It's not a war crime if we had fun." Or there are two answers that you can give to questions about Ukraine. One is it didn't take place, and the other is they earned it. And I mean many more. And these phrases in Russian are forever burned in the minds of Ukrainians. This is how we change the attitude to the language, and this is why. You can actually not believe it, that people would write such things. And these were words written in Russian.
Yeah, we believe, in this region, we believe everything.
So the language is not at fault, but hearing it, reading it, writing in it is traumatizing. That is why people have been turning away from it. And yeah, there are always people saying that, oh, Ukrainian soldiers speak Russian in the trenches. Well, some of them do, but they pick up a lot of Ukrainian in the army, because it's actually also a tool of survival, because you have to identify your own, and if that person is not speaking any Ukrainian, you know exactly who that is. So for writers, of course, it is heartbreaking, because if you have built all your legacy, all your portfolio on Russian, and we should be quite clear that writing in Russian would bring you a larger audience. It was very tempting for many people.
Well, actually, this was an argument for many. So why should I? Well, I will write in Ukrainian, and who will read my works? And if I write in Russian, so you gain a huge audience automatically.
Yeah, for example, myself, I come from this multicultural background, from a bilingual or even trilingual family, and there were relatives who asked me, why would you write in Ukrainian? I mean, Russian would give you such a bigger audience, so many opportunities. But I had a different relationship with the Russian language. Even if spoken at home, it was spoken in low register. So for me, it was a kitchen language. Of course, I read a lot of Russian books at school and later, but anything I would attempt to write in Russian would sound very archaic and very alien and full of pathos. And it just didn't come natural, and it didn't have the musicality I needed, which I always felt was important for the poetry. Well, I almost never wrote in Russian. I think I did several poems in the teenage years where it was extremely fashionable to write in Russian. But then I thought, well, Ukrainian is something I can breathe with. I can breathe with. I can sing with, and I just have chosen it as an instrument for my creative writing. It just felt right, well, intuitively. But I can understand the writers, especially in the later stages of their career, they're having difficulties to switch. And there were several writers who switched, and there's the successful example is Volodymyr Rafeenko.
So
who
you mean the
who has
prose
changed.
writers?
Yes,
not
he's a
poets.
prose, but he's a
yeah.
prose writer. And when it comes to poets, I think it's quite difficult. And there are many authors who are turning to self-translation. So they would
Yes.
write in Russian and they would self-translate. And well, I'm actually not a fan of self-translation at all. And I feel that you need this external perspective. Well, I ended up as a co-translator on my book, but that's because I just meddled too much with the translator's work. But I just feel that Russian and Ukrainian have such different poetics that you just need either to write in Ukrainian or have someone else translate your work into Ukrainian. So it will be done from within the language, not from within the text. So it's, of course, it's just my personal opinion.
Well, thank you very much. Shall we read now? Because,
Yes.
well, we are running out
Yeah.
of time. Yeah. So shall we start the first доки ти наближаєшся листопада?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
let's start with that one. So the first poem is from...
Sorry, we have to
Yes.
wait.
Yeah,
for
so
the-
the first poem is the only one we'll read today, from The God of Freedom. And while we are waiting for this translation...
Can you see it?
No, it's coming like it's going
No, maybe it's a small script, I mean, in this sense.
So this is translated by Olena Jennings into English here, but I will read for you in Ukrainian. Доки ти наближаєшся, листопаде, з-під сухого листу пробивається конюшина. Сонячне світло заліплює очі, і ми більше нічого не бачимо. Ані сивини на плодових деревах, ані стежки уздовж ріки, всіяної кістками, ані розпачливих написів на лев'ячого лігва в столітніх стінах. Ми віддали свої очі сонцю за мерехтливі брязкальця і перестиглі плоди, солодкий сік, який стікає по підборіддю, пестощі вогняних лисиць. Намацала шкаралупу каштана в кишені куртки кольору хакі, вкололася і прозріла. Ті, що йдуть на смерть, вітають тебе, листопаде.
So now I will read in Estonian. Nii kaua, kui sa lähened, november, tärkab kuivade lehtede alt ristik hein. Päikese valgus pimestab silmi ja me ei näe enam midagi. Ei hallust viljapuudel ega piki jõge kulgevat rada, mis on üle puistatud luudega. Ega meeleheitlikke raitkirju lõvikoopa 100-aastastel seintel. Oleme ära andnud oma silmad päikesele sädelevate kulinate ja üleküpsenud viljade eest. Magus mahl, mis voolab alla mööda lõuga, tuli rebaste kallistused. Kompasin kastani koort haki värvilise joppe taskus. Sain torgata ja sain nägijaks. Need, kes lähevad surma, tervitavad sind, november. Один момент. Що я не можу знайти?
So the next one is from Stones and Nails, as will be the rest of the poems. Дивилися на голе розтерзане тіло моєї вітчизни. Знімали і публікували фото і відео високої роздільної здатності. Жахалися, засуджували, непокоїлися, прицмокували. Гучно вболівали і підбадьорювали. Дивувалися, що ще жива. Захоплювалися стійкістю і хоробрістю. Пропонували їжу і питво, вологі серветки, ліжко-місце, дозвіл на працю. І все задармо. Поки скажений пес виривав з її тіла криваві шматки м'яса за мізинець до сонної артерії. Зібрався цілий натовп людей при повному озброєнні, але ніхто не натиснув на спусковий гачок, аби його раптом не струснуло віддачею.
Vaadati minu kodumaa paljast lõhki kistud keha. Tehti ja avaldati kõrge resolutsiooniga pilte ja videoid. Kohkuti, mõisteti hukka, muretseti, laksutati keelt. Avaldati valjusti toetust ja julgustati. Imestati, et veel elus. Imetleti visadust ja vaprust. Pakuti süüa ja juua, niskeid salvrätikuid, voodikohta, tööluba ja kõik tasuta. Kui marutõbine koer kiskus tema kehast veriseid lihatükke juba unearteri lähedal. Kogunes suur hulk täies relvastuses inimesi, aga mitte keegi ei vajutanud päästikule, et teda äkki ei raputaks tagasilöök.
There will be also the continued, yes. So this is the poem translated by Timothy Snyder, but now I have a new translation by Valjena Mort and Fiona Benson in English. Такі незручні, такі страшні вірші, повні люті, такі неполіткоректні. Жодної в цих віршах краси, жодної естетики. Метафори зсохли і розсипались, не забоявши. Метафори закопані на дитячих майданчиках під нашвидкоруч збитими хрестами. Завмерлі у неприродних позах біля під'їздів будинків, присипані пилом. Готували їжу на відкритому вогні, намагались вижити. Загинули від зневоднення під завалами, розстріляні в авто під білим прапором із простирадла, з яскравими наплічниками за спиною, лежать на асфальті до лілиць, поруч із котами і псами. Даруйте, але такі вірші – це все, що маємо для вас на сьогодні. Шановні пані та панове, глядачі театру війни.
Nii ebamugav, nii hirmus luule, täis raevu, nii poliitiliselt ebakorrektne. Pole ses luules mingit ilu, mingit esteetikat. Metafoorid on ära kuivanud ja pudenenud õide puhkemata. Metafoorid on maetud laste mänguväljakutele, kiiruga kokku löödud ristide alla, tardunud ebaloomulikes poosides majade välisuuste eest, kaetud rusude tolmuga, tegid süüa lahtiselt tulel, püüdsid ellu jääda, hukkusid veepuudusest rusude all. Autos maha lastud, voodilinnast valge lipu all. Eredad seljakotid seljas, lamavad asfaldil näoli kõrvuti lemmikloomadega. Vabandust, aga selline luule ongi kõik, mis meil on teile täna pakkuda, austatud daamid ja härrad, sõjateatri vaatajad. Квітне магнолія. Це.
Я думаю, що ми маємо час ще прочитати це.
Ну, що? Який це я не бачу?
Людина.
Людина зникає.
Людина зникає зі світу. На її місці з'являється веселка. На цьому березі залишаються діти, онуки. На тому перший подарований в дитинстві собака. Перша й остання любов – коні. Вічне блукання туманними пагорбами в плащі й гумовцях. Отже, тотальне щастя. Довге життя, стільки можливостей робити помилки та їх виправляти. Тільки б не змарнувати часу, тільки б не змарнувати. А відлік уже зупинився. Тут, на другому березі, стільки їх раптово новоприбулих. Розгублених, зранених дорослих, чужих дітей, які залазять на коліна, довірливо, попри пережите. Ритуал. Заритись обличчям у теплу шерсть собаки, в блискучу конячу гриву, в дружнє плече. Щоб легше було чекати і дочекатися сходу сонця, рідних, відплати.
Як це було англійською, цей вірш, назва, наступний?
Наступний.
Або цей вірш, як англійською?
This
Yeah.
one, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This was this.
Yeah.
Inimene kaob siit ilmast, tema asemele tekib vikerkaar. Ühele kaldale jäävad lapsed, lapselapsed, teisele esimene lapsepõlves kingitud koer, esimene ja viimane armastus, hobused, igavene ekslemine udustel küngastel, vihmamantlis ja kummikutega, seega täielik õnn. Pikk elu, nii palju võimalusi teha vigu ja neid parandada. Ainult, et ei kaotaks aega, ei kaotaks, aga arvestus peatus juba. Siin teisel kaldal on nii palju neid, kes saabusid äkki, segaduses, haavatud täiskasvanuid, võõraid lapsi, kes ronivad sülle, usaldades vaatamata läbi elatule. Rituaal, suruda nägu koera karvadesse, säravasse hobuse lakka, vastu sõbra õlga, et oleks kergem oodata ja ära oodata päikeseloojangut, lähedasi, kättemaksu. Магнолія.
Ми ще останній це читаємо?
Я не знаю, як так. Я думаю, що так. Як англійською це?
Magnolia is blooming. So we have saved that one for you for the final note. The poem for translating which Anna was awarded the prize. Квітне магнолія в чужому саду. Хочеться вмерти, але доводиться говорити. Ротом повним каміння і цвяхів, ротом повним крові. Вимовляти слова замість тих, з кого вийнято душу. Як довідатися, що вони хотіли сказати? Говори, поете, говори, хоч не маєш ніякого права. А коли стане геть нестерпно, спльовуй кров крізь каміння і цвяхи. І говори далі. Серця розчавлене яблуко не тримається купи. Квіти гордо відкриті до весняного сонця. Безсоромність природи. Сором живих. Гостре каміння слів у пересохлому роті.
Õitseb magnoolia võõras aias, tahaks surra, aga tuleb rääkida kive ja naelu täis suuga, verd täis suuga, hääldada sõnu nende asemel, kellelt on võetud hing. Kuidas teada, mida nad tahtsid öelda? Kõnele, luuletaja, kõnele, kuigi sul pole mingit õigust. Aga kui enam ei saa välja kannatada, sülita naelte ja kivide vahelt ja kõnele edasi. Südame puruks litsutud õun ei püsi koos. Õied on uhkelt avali kevad päikesele vastu. Looduse häbitus, elavate häbi, sõnade teravad kivid ära kuivanud suus.
Maybe we have time for one more poem. I just don't want to end on this very sad note. I like to end my readings with this poem. It has been translated to many different languages, including Japanese, and for that one I had to ask my translator to show me the place where exactly in the magazine that poem is, because I was not able to tell. So again, with many thanks to all of our translators worldwide for helping amplify Ukrainian voices. Хто сказав, що слова зараз не мають ваги? Наші слова, які пишуться на повітрі розпеченим залізом подихів. Кривавими згустками вражають на поблідлих губах. Вгризаються в ґрунт під нашими ногами, осідають на одяг і черевики, прахом від зруйнованих домівок. Наші слова тягнуться до близьких, до всіх, розкиданих по простреленій мапі країни. Слова міцними дротами сполучень, причепленими до серця, тугими линвами співтривання. Як сильно ми спільно можемо любити, як сильно ненавидіти. Слова, які згрібаємо у наплічник в останню мить перед виходом. Слова, за які хапаємося, щоб утримати хоч якусь рівновагу, коли з-під ніг вибивають землю, як хитку табуретку. Слова, якими притискаємо зяючу рану, розпанаханий тендітний живіт безпеки, ще підлітки. Наші слова тверді та опуклі від гніву, чорні від горя, як бетонне перекриття давнього бомбосховища. Немає нічого тривкішого за них, нічого непроминальнішого.
Kes ütles, et sõnadel pole praegu kaalu, meie sõnad, mis panevad end kirja õhku, hinge tõmmete hõõguva rauaga, mis tabavad nagu vereklombid kahvatutel huultel, raiuvad end mulda meie jalge all, settivad riietele ja jalatsitele nagu purustatud majade tolm. Meie sõnad püüdlevad meie lähedaste poole, kõigi poole, kes on puistatud üle auklikuks lastud maakaardi, mööda tugevaid ühendusjuhtmeid, mis on kinnitatud südamele, mööda koos kestmise tihkeid köisi. Kui tugevalt me võime üheskoos armastada, kui tugevalt võime vihata. Sõnad, mida kuhjame seljakotti, viimasel hetkel enne äraminekut. Sõnad, millest haarame kinni, et hoida mingitki tasakaalu. Kui maa lüüakse jalge alt ära nagu kõikuv taburet. Sõnad, mida surume vastu lahtist haava, vastu lõhki kistud turvalisuse õrna kõhtu alles nooruki oma. Meie sõnad, vihast kõvad ja paisunud, murest mustad, nagu vana pommivarjendi vahelagi. Pole midagi neist püsivamat, midagi kestvamat.
Thank you so much, Prima Vista Festival, Tartu, UNESCO City of Literature. Thank you, Anna. Thank you all for coming, and big thanks to the people who are keeping me alive and enabling me to travel around and present Ukrainian poetry. Of course, to Defense Forces of Ukraine. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Julia, thank you for your wonderful poetry and for coming here. Aitäh.